Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. What Made You Lose Your Job? Part 5. I used to work a job where you had to stay late to finish tasks because there was no transfer system in place or anything similar to make sure you could end the call before your shift ended. I would occasionally be a few minutes late, the average being only 2 to 3 minutes. The two most likely balanced out, but they most likely skewed to continue giving the business more time. I never had a critique of my work, and I received perfect scores on all of my evaluations. On the day I was being promoted, I noticed that they had removed me from the training and were replacing me with someone else in the chat room I had been added to. No issues have been communicated up to this point. It turns out that, upon further investigation, i.e. finally completing their work that ought to have been completed well earlier, they discovered that my few minutes of tardiness had accrued enough points in the system to put me approximately 30 points over the termination limit. Never even had a verbal conversation, but they must have known they made a mistake because I received a written final rather than being fired right away. That's a red flag. After a few months, as I continue to work hard and adjust to new expectations, my mother passes away. I'm 27 years old. I had some difficulty adhering to the schedule consistently and experienced a few unforeseen problems. For example, on one day, Duke Energy lost power, causing me to have tech difficulties for the majority of the day, and on another, my air conditioner broke down in the intense Florida heat, causing my home to reach high 80s. They concentrated on that one because I followed a procedure that presumably didn't work as I thought and wasn't mentioned anywhere in the handbook, although it was still carried out in a particular way, which I erred in. Then was dragged into a meeting with an HR representative and an operations manager, two individuals I don't even work with every day. They informed me that, despite their best efforts to work with me, they had attempted to terminate my employment because I was approximately 10 points over the termination limit for a point adherence, a nearly 20-point drop from our previous conversations just a few months earlier. Additional details. I brought screenshots of the company handbook and policy showing nothing mentioned for the adherence I was being negatively impacted for. I was laid off the previous year in the same month due to restructuring in the company and was brought back a week later because of how good my performance was promised there by the HR I wouldn't be laid off like that again without cause. Another red flag I should have seen but needed a job, and the company, a month or so prior to my termination, announced they were filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. All of these are received by me in meetings with my direct supervisor since the final written document, and I never received any indication that I wasn't doing things correctly. To give you an idea of how the point system worked, you get 3 points for being late by a few minutes and for not telling the supervisor directly each time, which can save you a point or two. You receive 1 point for giving them an extra hour to work. You are penalized for uploading an excessive amount of support documentation, such as doctor's notes, in a single month to cover missed work days. Even minor infractions like using the restroom late were taken against you. Additional work time must be approved. Yes, that was my last year of employment. But hey, it's remote work and everyone's so friendly. If you want to keep your job, you can choose to be a robot or we'll turn you into a slave. I informed them that I would need to give 2 weeks' notice to my current employer when I accepted the job. They both said that it would be all right. It turned out that the woman I was replacing had to leave sooner than anticipated. At around the same time, the business owner made the decision to bring in her neighbor's college-aged daughter to assist with secretarial office work while she was home. She had the college girl learn from the woman I was supposed to replace how to do some of the work I'd be doing so she could cover for me until I started. I was able to train for 4 hours on a Saturday, but I was unable to train during the week because I was still working at my other job. The owner called me the next day to let me know that it wasn't going to work out and that I wasn't picking up on things as quickly as she had hoped. I've only had 4 hours of training, I said. I believe the owner recently realized that for half the price, she could have the college student complete the majority of the work I was going to be paying her to do and then assign the remaining tasks to other employees, which is okay because she's the company owner and I wouldn't want to pay someone I didn't really need. But rather than acting as though I was the issue, she ought to have just stated that. In the end, everything worked out. I was offered a promotion to stay at the job I was going to leave. I accepted it, and the company where I lost my job filed for bankruptcy. I disclosed that I was waiting for an organ transplant and on a waiting list when I was hired. I would take an FMLA leave right away if I got the call. The odds were slim, though, because I had only been listed for a few months, and most people wait for at least a couple of years. A call from my transplant team comes in 2 months later. They have almost an ideal match for an organ. Do I desire it? Naturally, I do. Fantastic. We'll have you in surgery at 10 if you come in tomorrow at 8. All of this took place on a Sunday evening. I gave my foreman a call right away and explained the situation in my message. After that, I sent HR a message requesting the documentation. For a long time, no one spoke to me. When I'm allowed to return to work after 6 weeks, I give my foreman a call. "Hi there, it's me. It's okay for me to return." "We, let you go." "How come?" "Yes, you were fired by us. You're no longer employed here." Who was gonna inform me when exactly? It seems that their reaction to my surgery, which changed my life, was to fire me right away while I was lying in a hospital bed, leaving me without health insurance or unemployment benefits. The company failed and went out of business after about a year. There was a mass exodus, it seems, once my other coworkers realized what had transpired. In less than a week, they lost almost every blue-collar guy who wasn't a shop favorite. Until I returned to work, those same guys pitched in and helped my wife, me, and our newborn get by. I'd been in a union apprenticeship for less than a year when these guys really stood up for me. Brotherhood within the union is real. How do you deal with your terrible HOA or neighbor? Part 5. I ordered the neighbor's house to be demolished and condemned. The short version of the story is that there were 2 houses on the property next to mine. The owners chose to completely renovate one of them, piling the wreckage of the demolition in the front yard next to my house. The owners, who were renting out the property, they did not live there, ignored my repeated requests for them to take action, and the S remained there for a full year. Eventually, I inquired about their remodel permits from the city and discovered that not only did they not have any, but the house was officially declared to be non-existent by the county and city. It was connected to the other home utilities and constructed without any plans or permits. After speaking with the city planner office, they came out and condemned the house in addition to putting a stop work order on it, which wasn't really necessary given that no work had been done in a year. They assured the owners that if they demolished the house, they would not face any fines or legal action. That may sound extreme, but they weren't going to allow them to restore it after the house had already been completely destroyed and had no windows or doors. That's how I managed to have someone's home demolished. The story's lengthy, but problems with the neighbors grew significantly worse. Edit. I'll tell the rest of the story now that I have some free time. John moved in after the Russians had evicted 2 short-term tenants from the property and were left with just 1 rental house. John didn't seem like a big deal at first, but his excessive noise soon became an issue. Every day of his life, he ran log splitters and chainsaws. It transpired that John's hustle consisted of using his truck in the early morning hours to harvest trees on forestry service land, transporting the logs back to his house, and splitting them into enormous piles. Instead of stacking them, as would suggest, in a rustic scene with a row of logs neatly stacked, he piled them into enormous messy mounds. The issue we faced was that John was renting the first house on the street and his enormous truck, which had plywood walls on the back, was a complete joke. When fully loaded with logs, it was unable to ascend the hill to reach the house without losing momentum and becoming stuck. Hence, a few times a week, he would become stuck, unload his logs in the road to free the truck, and then make trips to get them all to his house. In this way, he would essentially block the road, trapping people inside or outside, depending on the circumstances at the moment. He was not at all concerned. I attempted to discuss the situation with the Russians, but they remained uninterested. When approached by the city police, they said we're powerless because it's a private road. I eventually brought up his illegal, unlicensed business with the city licensing office. They promised to investigate. I received a call from the license people a few days later telling me that everything was fine and that he was using the firewood for personal use rather than operating a business. I responded, no, that is absolutely absurd. He has hundreds of cords of wood, so he spends his entire day either bringing in and splitting logs or removing split wood. I then showed her John's Craigslist advertisements, which offer to deliver and sell firewood at a reasonable price, which is helpful if you steal the wood in the first place. I'll look into it, she remarked. A few days later, she calls me back and claims he says he only sells a couple $1,000s worth of firewood a year, which is below the limit for needing a business license. I call her naive, but promise to support her in her work. I installed a trail camera on my property that faced the location where all vehicle traffic would have to pass. I also collected time-stamped photos demonstrating his daily removal of multiple loads of split logs, calculated the cost of a cord based on his Craigslist ad, and estimated that he would make approximately $10,000 in sales per month, not $2,000. She promised to investigate. By now, one of my other neighbors had taken over the John City Us project and was pestering the city to assign someone to handle their effing job on a full-time basis. Eventually, the city wrote to each of us to inform us that they and John had come to an agreement for John to remove all wood from the property, apart from 3 cords for personal use, remove all advertisements, stop selling, and stop running any ads. Before calling the city out once more, we gave John 60 days to behave in an entirely non-compliant manner. This led to me and 4 other neighbors attending a city council meeting where John stood in front of them and sobbed about being a crippled veteran with 3 disabled children. There had never been a child at the house, how this was his only source of income, and how his neighbors were always harassing him. When the council president asked my neighbors and I to each make a statement, I said that while no one questioned John's right to a livelihood, we were strictly residential rather than industrial, and his operation was incompatible with a 1-lane unpaved road. In the end, the city granted John an additional 90 days to abide by their earlier directive. A few weeks later, things seemed to finally calm down and John seemed to be complying. Not too long afterward, one day I received a text from my neighbor saying John is gone. I sent my wife a text and she returned from work carrying a bottle of champagne and we celebrated his departure with a toast. And so, John's story ended there. My present neighbors purchased the house after the Russians decided to sell it. They're amazing, incredibly quiet, and personal individuals. They keep it inside the house and don't talk about it even though they're probably doing something terrible too. The HOA's entrance was located in the middle of the small street that ran alongside a golf course. All 5 board members resided on the western half, while the majority of people lived on the eastern half. I noticed the eastern half of the condo was prettier when I bought it, but I foolishly thought that was because the residents there had decorated it themselves. At the time I moved in, the HOA charged about $250 a month for water service. In exchange, the HOA was in charge of maintaining the exterior, including landscaping and roofs. 4 years later, I finally moved out, and the fees had increased to almost $450 a month. They stated that a long-term beautification project and rising costs were to blame for this. Indeed, something was going on, but it was limited to the eastern side of the street. Maybe 5 azalea bushes would be planted on the eastern side, where the majority of the members, including myself, lived. On the other hand, the western side received new trees and a sizable ornamental garden. While the western side received 3 or 4 pressure washings annually, the eastern side was covered in moss. Foolishly, I went to a meeting to inquire about the difference. Things just hadn't gotten to my end yet, was the statement made to me. I had made my way onto their S-list and was getting notes about how I was breaking their rules and was being threatened with fines when I went to the second meeting to voice my concerns. Even worse, the homeowners association first attempted to argue that I was attempting to deceive them into paying for a new windshield for my car after a golfer broke my back door window. I'm not sure where they got the idea from. The last straw came when water started seeping through my ceiling caused by a repair contract awarded to the board president's son-in-law, and they attempted to argue that they were not liable for any of the damages or repair costs. So I decided to take more decisive action. I read all available information about the HOA, contacted the management company, and it turns out they were not aware that the board does everything in this way. I also contacted a lawyer I know to consult on what I can do. He advised me to get a city inspector to check on the HOA. I also talked to my neighbors on the affected side. We joined forces and came to the next meeting fully armed. In short, on the same day, the old board was disbanded and the new board consisted of people who lived both on the east side and on the west side. And they were definitely not relatives of the old board. It also turned out that the old board had been falsifying progress reports, and what was supposed to be spent on the east half was being embezzled by the board members. Their fines were huge. Some of them even had to move out and sell their expensive, beautiful houses, and some went to jail. If you want to watch the part 4, click the link here. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for support.